What's up, everybody? Ricky Kidd here with the Midwest Innocence Project, serving as our community engagement manager over the last 2 years, and excited and honored to be in that role as we raise awareness together to help bring innocent individuals home. One of the ways that we do that is through our Fireside Chat series, where we sit down with individuals and we talk the issues behind wrongful conviction, the nuances, and the complexities. I have the honor to be sitting down today with an exoneree out of Michigan, an exoneree on fire to raise awareness about wrongful conviction. His name is Kenneth Nixon. Kenneth Nixon has joined me today. How you doing, my friend?
I'm doing great. How are you?
Good. Thank you for taking the time to sit down with us on our series called Where Are They Now? Where Are They Now is where we sit down with individuals as yourself and we raise awareness about what your transition has been like, some of the failures, some of the successes, some of the traumas, and what you're doing actively now as it relates to the issue at hand. Let's catch up with you, Kenneth. Let's tell the listening audience of your case, where it happened, the charge, the sentence, and the release.
Okay. My name is Kenneth Nixon. I'm from Michigan. I spent 15 years and 9 months incarcerated for a crime that I did not commit. The case stemmed from a firebombing of a house. There were 2 children that perished in the fire. I was eventually arrested and convicted of 2 counts of felony murder, 4 counts of attempted murder, and 1 count of arson. I was sent to prison with 2 natural life sentences plus 40 to 60. I was eventually able to prove my innocence, and I was exonerated on February 18th of this year, just a little over 6 months ago.
Man, and as I mentioned, you didn't waste no time hitting the ground running. Something that I can personally relate to. I came home August 15, 2019. I did not wait. I felt that there was a sense of urgency, that there was no time to wait. Did you feel that same way?
Oh, absolutely. Immediately upon coming home, I saw flaws that in my head were simple fixes that they shouldn't have been there.
Yeah. What? You're here now. We're so happy you're here now. We're excited to watch what you're doing now. We're going to talk about some of that, what you're doing now. But it took you a minute to get here. It took decades of your life before you was able to get here. Many people wanted to know from me. I want to know from you. How did you survive that?
Just staying focused, man. I was training myself every day for this moment. I was reading books. I was reading newspapers, magazines, just really preparing myself for the day that I knew would come eventually. I didn't know when and under what circumstances it would come, but I knew it was going to come. So, I stayed as focused as possible, building my treasure chest of words and books as my ammo, preparing myself just for when that opportunity presented itself. In my head, I was going to take full advantage of it. So when it did, I took full advantage of it.
Yeah. And you can tell that you did that. You can tell when individuals have done that because their transition is a little more seamless. The airplane that's coming out of the sky, it lands and it bounces. There's still a bounce. Yeah. It lands and it bounces, opposed to landing and going up in smoke and fume. So you can tell that you did that. Let me ask you this, my friend. What one thing do you wish more people knew about wrongful convictions?
The one thing I wish more people knew was that once you're exonerated, that transition isn't as simple as people think. Naturally, people assume that once you're exonerated, you regain everything, right? You regain your personhood, your citizenship, your livelihood, your identity. None of that is true. Absolutely none of it. It took me 3 months to get a birth certificate. I had to order a social security card that took 6 weeks to get in my possession. I had to wait on my birth certificate before I can get a driver's license. None of what people assume to be true. In fact, to this day, 6 months later, after I've been exonerated, this conviction still shows up on my record. So the court proceedings are still going on. And every time I fill out for a job, I'll have to explain why there's a murder conviction on my background check. So, you know, I wish that more people knew and understood the process of once you're free, you're not exactly free.
Yeah. And so we just wrapped up an important day, Wrongful Conviction Day, raising awareness about wrongful convictions all across the country and outside of the country. This year's theme was "The Fight Continues." It sounds like what you're describing is how the fight continues. But I want to ask you this particular question. Have you yourself experienced the continued trauma of being wrongfully convicted? Even though you come home, you've been released, you've been exonerated. Have you experienced the continued trauma of being wrongfully convicted? And if so, could you share with our listening audience to help people understand that the fight isn't over when someone is released?
Oh, absolutely. I still experience it on a regular basis. You know, speaking from personal experience, I'm still triggered by the sound of keys. You know, anytime there's some keys rattling, it makes me a little nervous, a little jumpy. And the reason for that is because inside, you know, keys are an indication that the officer is coming. So, you know, just the thought of the key itself making that noise makes me a little paranoid from time to time. I'm forcing myself to be aware of it when it happens, but it's small things like that that get my attention. You know, people assume that you're normal once released, but you know, I've got guys around me that have been in my same situation, and something as small as the scent of soap triggers people. You know, we've got a guy that bugged out, like literally lost his mind because his wife bought a particular type of soap, and that soap triggered him into a violent mode. So yeah, I mean, of course, there's lasting effects of just the environment itself.
Yeah, one of the things that I suffer from is keys as well, the jingling of keys from day one. I wasn't ready to initially open up and share that. There was a couple other issues that bothered me as well. I wasn't ready at the time. I am now. I'm so glad that you are. People need to know that. People need to know what some of these issues are. Even though we're released, we're still fighting, whether that's mentally, spiritually, emotionally, sometimes physically, and sometimes financially. So I appreciate you sharing that with us, Kenneth. Let me ask you my next question. Is there anything that you failed at that you thought perhaps you wouldn't have failed at when you came home? A thought, an image, a vision of what you thought you could, would, or should be doing, but then you came home and that wasn't the case. Did you experience that personally?
Absolutely. In my head, coming home, I thought I was just going to be able to get all of my documents in order. I was going to be able to move forward with my life. And, you know, I'd heard that the conviction still stays on your record until it's officially cleared off. But the first time I actually saw a background check, or the first time I was actually rejected from a job because of it, oh, that stung. That stung like crazy, because in my mind, I was just going to move on with my life. I was going to put it all behind me, and I was going to step out into the world free, clear, clean, and, you know, move on. But the reality is it was still lingering. It's still lingering right now. And to me, that's a huge failure, even though it's to no fault of my own. That failure itself affects how I move on a daily basis.
Yeah, you know, one of my fears myself is that, in a sense. So I carry my papers. I carry my exoneration papers with me, because to this day, in my backpack, everywhere I go, no exception, it's like a driver's license or an insurance card, because I'm afraid that the communication, that the signals has been crossed, and that somebody who may stop me or who may have concerns about my free citizenship may have not gotten the memo. And it sounds like you've experienced that when it comes to trying to seek gainful employment where they haven't got the memo. Is that basically what you're sharing with our audience?
Oh, absolutely. And that's honestly, that's just one example. One of the first trips I went on when I first came home was to Vegas. And at the time, I didn't have state identification. I had my discharge identification that was given to me from the Department of Corrections. And, you know, to shrink the story a little bit, I flew from Michigan to Vegas with this ID. I gambled with this ID. I bought drinks with this ID, but they refused to let me in the swimming pool with this ID. So my argument to the security guard was, I went through a TSA checkpoint with this ID, and you're telling me I can't get a tan with this ID? And she looked at me like I was crazy because it was truth and it was facts. That, I mean, I didn't have any other ID. That was the only ID that was given to me. And without the proper documents, I couldn't get a real ID. Wow. But here I am being victimized all over again and having to explain this story all over again over a swimming pool.
Yeah, that's deep. That's deep. I'm so glad you shared that. And that's why we have people on, man. That's why we have these conversations, because people do not know. They don't know the educational components behind wrongful convictions, what caused wrongful convictions, some of the nuances and complexities surrounding wrongful convictions, but they also don't know the stories. They don't know the stories until we tell those stories, or unless we create a platform that allows us to tell those stories. So we're glad that we're able to do that over here at the Midwest Innocence Project with our Fireside Chat series. My next question, we just talked about visions of success and then facing those failures or those shortcomings, if you will. But there are moments of success. I personally had them. I know you've had them. Share with us and our listening audience, if you will, what some of those successes have been for you.
Some of the successes for me, I enjoy the advocacy part of it. And when I came home, there were a lot of very, very, I guess you can call small issues associated with my exoneration that became big issues because I had no control over them. So when I set out on my advocacy venture, you know, I wanted to fix some of those small things. One of the big things was getting a bank account, because there was an innocence project associated with my exoneration. You know, people wanted to donate money to help me get on my feet. The problem is that money came in the form of checks, and without proper identification, I couldn't cash those checks. Without a proper identification, I couldn't get a bank account. So what I set out to fix was the bank account thing. I don't know how it is in other states, but in Michigan, you need 2 forms of ID in order to start a bank account. Well, I made it my personal mission to fix that. I was able to make contact with the president of a national bank. I explained our situations. And now anytime we have an exoneree, I can make that phone call and say, hey, this guy needs a bank account. Problem solved. What took me 4 months to handle now takes less than 24 hours once he's notified. So, you know, to me, that's a success, because I took something that was a huge burden upon other exonerees and, you know, shrank it to a simple fix. A phone call now handles that.
Yeah, you sound like, and I've had the opportunity to converse with you and to watch your work, the collective work of the team over there. And we're going to talk about that here in just a second. But would you consider yourself to be a pragmatic person, a problem solver, if you will?
Absolutely. I'm a firm believer, if there's a will, there's a way.
Yeah. Yeah. And you certainly displayed that and exemplified that when you share your story about the bank scenario. Individuals coming home, falling short with the prerequisites or the requirements needed to go into a bank and open a bank account. You was able to go in there, see a problem, and offer up a solution to the powers that be. And that has resolved, or rather resulted in a much faster scenario where individuals can open up account. That's not the only thing that you've done in the space and the capacity of Kenneth Nixon. Talk to our audience about the work that you're doing on a bigger scale, the organization that you've started that has way bigger issues at hand if you will.
So one of the things that I noticed when I came home was that there was no cohesiveness amongst my innocent peers. It seemed like everybody was doing their own thing in separate areas, but they were all doing the same thing, just individually. So one of the things that I set out to do was try to bring everybody together. And the plan that I came up with to handle that was we build an organization and we all move under the same umbrella. And it worked. I knew that I needed to find something big enough that everybody could get involved in. Everybody could have their own part and play their own role in whatever the mission would be. Just so happened, these two Missouri cases came across our desk. Once it came across my desk, I did my homework, and that was it. Just the whole Kevin Strickland, Lamar Johnson, state of Missouri, attorney general, just the whole scenario itself was big enough for me to bring 20 plus members in under the same umbrella in order to get some cohesiveness and to be able to get a mutual understanding that we could all do things individually, but we could also move as one because our numbers speak for themselves. Our mission speaks for itself. Our backgrounds and our history can't be denied. But one thing that no one can shrug off is a group of us. I don't think there's a prosecutor or attorney general in this country that wants the headline that they refused a meeting with a group of exonerees. How do you explain that to anybody?
Yeah, that is so powerful. You understand the definition and the power of leverage. We get to leverage our awful experience. 23 years for myself, 28 years for another individual, 13 years over here, 14 years over there. High numbers nonetheless. High numbers of in the 25,000 plus years collectively, according to the National Registry. But the power of leverage, the ability to be able to come home and say, hey, I have a voice. Hey, there's others who are voiceless. And so we're going to stand in the gap and we're going to raise awareness and amplify the message. And by the way, exonerees, we get to do that collectively. And by the way, powers to be, we're here to be heard. You've done that. Listen, what about the families? Your voice have echoed loud. The collective voices of your organization, we're going to talk about that here in a second, have echoed loud to the powers that be, to the media, various media outlets. What about the families of those wrongfully convicted who are saying, hey, you're out, but my loved ones are not? It's hard. It continues to get harder. It seems to get harder every day. What would you say to those families?
I would tell those families to keep, I know it sounds simple. I know it sounds very, minute, and I'm not trying to reduce anybody in this situation because, I went through it firsthand. The thing that you can get from exonerees that you can get nowhere else is the personable part. I know personally exactly what it feels like to be where your loved one is. So, I don't take this lightly. I don't take me telling you to keep fighting lightly, because at the end of the day, they want you to quit. They want you to give up. They want you to stop fighting. But the reality is the system will break before you will. You just got to keep going. You just got to keep pushing that wall until it finally folds over. Never give up. Quitting is not an option. Folding is not an option. You have to be stronger than the machine.
Yeah, that's powerful, man. That's so powerful. I really hope those who are listening, those who have family members still on the inside waiting to come home, pay attention to what you're saying. People have asked me, why didn't you give up? Or what was it that didn't allow you to give up? I knew that if I accepted defeat at any point, then there is no reason to go back out in the ring because I've already lost in my mind. So I just want to echo what you're saying. It's not just some cheerleading going on here. Yeah, don't give up. You can't give up. You can't afford to give up, because if you do, then you've already lost the fight. What would you have to say to other individuals, everyday individuals? Their family is not enduring a wrongful conviction, but they're watching and they're listening. What would you say to them, Kenneth?
I would tell those people to do something. Get up and do something. You know, everybody can't do everything. Criminal justice is huge. This is a national problem. This isn't a local problem. It's not a Detroit problem or a Kansas City problem or a St. Louis problem. This is a national problem, and it's going to take all of us to change it. So my statement to people sitting on the sidelines, do something. And if you can't do something, donate something, because these are the things that matter, right? You donate to a cause that you believe in, and there's a lot of change to be made, and that change can't be made without dollars. You know, there's rallies and protests going on all over this country. If you can make it, show up, because the bodies matter. That's how you make people listen. When you show up and there's 100,000 people out in the street, somebody's going to want to know why there's 100,000 people out in the street. So, you know, there's always something to be done, and it doesn't have to be big. If you can't donate, volunteer. You know, you can go make copies somewhere. You can go drop off paperwork somewhere. The Innocence Projects all over this country are always looking for volunteers to do basic stuff, you know, setting up tables for a meeting or something. There's always something to be done. Do something.
Yeah, that's powerful, man. That's powerful, and it's so fact. It's so factual. Listen, what is the name of your organization, so people could so it could be clear and people can understand, and how can they learn more about that organization and the work that you're doing?
We are the National Organization of Exonerees. We have a Facebook page, Allies of the National Organization of Exonerees. We're always posting stuff. My entire group has personal Facebook pages that you can find. If you find one of us, you'll find all of us. Myself is Ken Nixon on Facebook. But, you know, we're working on building our own website. But to the question of what we do, we have recently begun to travel the country, trying to bring awareness to the issue of wrongful convictions and the pitfalls of the criminal justice system. A lot of people don't understand how the system works, but to those that do, when you look at us guys in yellow shirts, you know, when you look at someone that tells you they're an exoneree, you're looking at what it looks like when the system gets it wrong. We are a true definition, a walking, talking, living testimony of what goes wrong when humans run a system. The criminal justice system is run by humans, and anything that's run by humans, there's space for human error, sometimes intentionally, sometimes by mistake. But we are what it looks like when the system gets it wrong. We are the true definition of what injustice looks like.
Kenneth Nixon, thank you so much for taking out time for your day to sit down with me here with the Midwest Innocence Project. My name is Ricky Kidd. I've been your host today for this edition of Where Are They Now? Stay tuned, because there will be more who will sit down and talk to, and there's always more issues at hand for us to discuss. Again, Ricky Kidd here with the Midwest Innocence Project. You've been watching Fireside Chat.